I think we are in a new era where, by and large, international relations aren't going to be determined by rules and multilateral institutions. They're going to be determined by strong men and deals. I think of the Yalta Treaty at the end of 1945, where three strong men, as they were then, on behalf of the big countries, the strong countries, decided the fate of small countries. I think that's Donald Trump's mindset, certainly Putin's mindset. It's Xi Jinping's mindset. It's not Europe's mindset. That's the world we're going into for a whole set of reasons, and I don't think we're going back to the one we had before.
Why do you say that?
Because the one we had before was based on the unipolar moment where America had both the means and the will to assert itself across the world. It created what we call globalization, the international security structure. It's now a significantly smaller player relative to others than it was. And of course, its will to be that person has diminished. So it still remains a prodigious country. You underestimate America at your peril. But its ability to make the rules across the world, that's not there now. Okay. We are seeing deals. We're seeing a conversation about spheres of influence. And I think the only people who haven't woken up to this reality is us.
Europe.
Yeah, and there's an entry ticket to this conversation, it appears. And sadly, it's not our soft power or our values, it's hard power. And it leaves the category challenge for us in Europe. How do we develop that to get ourselves a seat in this conversation? No, I think it's unfortunate, and I agree with Catherine, this will be emboldening to Putin. I don't know whether Donald Trump actually buys the Russian line, but I think the Russians probably think he does, and I think that significantly diminishes his leverage. And I saw this happen in Afghanistan, where he gave away the biggest concession before we even started. It's a strange art of the deal, honestly. Look, Zelensky and Trump, they're in their way different politicians. Zelensky had no choice, I think, but to respond when he was accused of lacking democratic legitimacy. And Donald Trump is notoriously thin-skinned, and we've got into this spat. I do not think we should read too much into it. These negotiations are at a very early stage. They're going to be highly complicated. Exactly as I expected, Russia has gone maximal to the point that they may even have overreached. It's going to be very, very hard for Trump to cut through this in a way that produces anything that isn't an abject humiliation.
What do you mean Russia have overreached? What do you mean?
The issue is that Trump and Putin are talking about different things. So Trump thinks this is about territory, characteristically as a real estate guy. It's about land, giving land to Russia in return for peace. It's not about territory, and Putin said it's about sovereignty. Putin was super clear when he started this war that the existence of Ukraine as a sovereign and free country was an unacceptable affront to Russian security. He will not stop until Ukraine isn't a country anymore. And that is a completely different conversation. And by the way, there's more. There's Europe NATO putting constraints on its presence in Eastern Europe and going back to previous borders in '97. This is well out of scope. I don't think it's stuff that Donald Trump has clearly thought about. But you're instantly into it. Russia came out today and said they wouldn't accept Western troops in Ukraine. Of course they said that. They are determined that Ukraine should be an undefended basket case. But we're talking about security guarantees as a necessary endgame. It still feels, for all of this bluster, a fundamentally irreconcilable problem.
Right. How worried should people who are watching tonight be?
Well, I think that as a European, it's a massive wake-up call. Whatever you think about this, all the smoke and dust and mirrors and complexity, and I don't know how it's going to end. I know one thing for certain, which is that Europe will own more of this at the end than it did at the beginning. Now, I do not want to exaggerate. The Russian army has performed risibly. It's not going to march into Warsaw tomorrow. But nor should we obscure the fact that this will be hugely emboldening. And over time, they will build up their capabilities. The reason we don't need to be that worried is we are 10 times richer as European NATO than Russia. We absolutely have the capability to build up the necessary military forces to resist this. But if we don't do that, then yes, this is the stuff of nightmares.
What do you think the British Prime Minister should be saying to Donald Trump?
So two things. First of all, I absolutely agree with Catherine. We need to organise to effect to demonstrate that we're prepared to play a role, take control of our own environment, recognise that we've got to develop hard power, and that's got to happen quickly. Donald Trump is not wrong about everything. We were free riding. Sure. There was free riding in Europe, and this needs to be sorted out. And the other thing is what I have just said. I think you need to explain to Donald Trump why giving away Ukraine as a country, giving away its sovereignty would be a devastating mistake. Trump has already said that Putin should not be allowed to be seen to win. He seems to understand that as a concept, although I accept that his tone has changed. He was quite complicit in Afghanistan, even though he pinned it on Joe Biden. He gave away the farm before it even started, and that led to the fiasco. He can't own a fiasco like that. And then think of the example this sets for Xi Jinping, sitting across the Taiwan Strait from Taiwan. That goes straight into Xi Jinping's mind. Yes. So these are the things that I would be advising the Prime Minister to dwell on, although I'm sure he's got a lot of ideas of his own.
Do you have confidence that a fair and sustainable, to quote the words of Marco Rubio yesterday, settlement will be the outcome of this? No.
I think it's wide open. So I think it can be. And actually, I think Trump has quite considerable leverage. As Catherine said, the reality is that the Russian economy is grossly out of shape and cannot be run like this for more than another year. And Putin has lost 800,000 killed or wounded, which even for an autocrat like him has got to have an effect. And most important of all, I think that this is a huge psychological moment for Putin. He's been waiting for years for Trump to get in. And if Trump actually turns out not to be the opportunity the Russians expect, they don't have another plan. So there's quite a lot of leverage here. And I think if it can be firmly established in Donald Trump's mind that having a residual free Ukraine is his bargaining point, he can get that. And I think if that happens, we're going to be okay. It's a wake-up call. We need to organise to effect. It is a huge tragedy for people who will be left behind the frozen front line, but we can deal with that. If it's do a deal at any cost, get out and give it to the Europeans, then I think that's a big problem.